Good afternoon, Kate. Good morning here in North America, but good afternoon over there in Europe. It's a pleasure to finally connect now that you've joined FigBytes. Would you mind giving us a little introduction to who is Kate Cacciatore?
Yeah, thanks so much, Rajiv. It's a real pleasure to have joined FigBytes and to be with you today on this webinar. So I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. I'm from the UK originally, although I haven't lived there for many years. My career has taken me to some very unusual places and amazing experiences in the field of sustainability. And to give you a high-level sense of that, it started for me in the academic domain. So I did my degree and my PhD in French literature, which has nothing to do with sustainability, obviously. In those days, there weren't really courses for sustainability, I don't think. And after my PhD, I moved to Italy after doing some teaching. And I discovered sustainability at an Italian university near Milan, where there was someone teaching applied anthropology and comparative economics. And it turned out to be sustainability that was the actual subject. And that moment was the moment in which I kind of knew this was what I wanted to do. I had been feeling a really strong calling to somehow humanize business. I did not know what that meant at all. I thought maybe it would mean human resources in a company, but that path just didn't open up for me. When I heard about sustainability in terms of, the human dignity, human rights, stewardship of the planet, it resonated with me really deeply from my personal values, but also it gave me a language to work with in the world of business so that I could see myself engaging with people and making the connection between their personal values and the way the company and its purpose and its strategy could bring about a positive impact in some way. So that was kind of all in me, but I just didn't have the words or the concepts for it. And I got the opportunity to work in a major semiconductor company called ST Microelectronics after a brief stint working in strategic marketing in Milan. And it was a bit of a fairy tale situation because I didn't really have any experience in business. I had a little bit of academic understanding about sustainability and some of the reporting that was beginning to really pick up in those days. But essentially, I knew nothing. And I walked into a job which was, I had a blank sheet in a way to work with the Vice President of Total Quality and Environment at the time. And so began a whirlwind experience of 9 years in total in ST Microelectronics, where we sort of had to sit down and figure out, listening to different external and internal stakeholders, what should our sustainability strategy be? What were the pressures the company was under? How it could expand beyond environment to cover things like human rights, ethics, supply chain, all the big topics that were really picking up in intensity in those days. And so it was really learning by doing, and it was a fabulous opportunity, not without its challenges, of course, but that was part of the process of learning. Not too long after starting working for ST Microelectronics, I was in the right place at the right time, going to the meetings, the quarterly meetings of the Electronic Industry Citizenship Coalition. And I was representing ST Microelectronics, just sharing the perspectives that we had on all of the issues relating to sustainability in the electronic sector. And I had the great luck and opportunity to join. I was elected to join the board of directors at the time of the incorporation of the EICC, which was essentially creating a code of conduct for the whole electronic sector and a shared approach to implementing that with processes that all the companies, from the brands to the suppliers, the contract manufacturers, all the way down to the mines. So it was a fascinating challenge and opportunity to work thinking about a sustainability strategy, not just for one company, but for all the companies in the value chain together. So that was just absolutely wonderful. And then after that, I was looking for a new challenge, wanted to get into a different sector, and I had the chance to get into the finance industry. So I worked for 6 years
Very different from
the
semiconductor space. Yeah.
It was in Edmond de Rothschild, where they were basically they wanted to create a sustainability strategy or embed sustainability into the strategy of their 3 banks, which were coming together as a single banking group at the time. And what was really fascinating about this for me was obviously learning a whole new world, but I had been in charge of the sustainability aspects of investor relations in ST Microelectronics. So I'd been on the receiving end of all the questionnaires and, requests by investors and rating agencies for all the information that they needed. And here I was on the other side of the table, learning about, what were they actually trying to understand? How did this work in practice? How do you create financial products that sort of based on the sustainability performance of companies in different sectors? So I had an amazing experience there. So long story short, I had the opportunity to join a group of people creating a startup in the area of meaningful work. And this resonated with me so much because one of the things I had observed was that in companies, the change that was possible because people had connected with their own personal values. And I saw that for myself. I saw it in the people that were around me. And so I thought, well, maybe by getting into this world of meaningful work, I'll be able to understand more about the drivers of change through personal reflection, connecting with our own values and purpose as individuals, and then having a clearer sense of how we can contribute to a collective purpose and collective activity together for making the world more sustainable. So
you've given me so many pieces of information that I'm holding on to, and I would love to dig deeper into that. It's a fantastic career that you've had thus far, Kate. What's happening now?
Yeah, so now I stepped out of obviously sustainability for a couple of years, and then I had the opportunity to get back into this world, and I was missing it, to be honest, because it's what I've always done in my career. And so when I got the opportunity to work for FigBytes, the idea really appealed to me for a couple of reasons. One, because I love the company, its vision and its values, and its focus on connecting data with purpose really resonates with me. And at the same time, I just really feel that this whole space of data and measurement and communication and reporting of the company's sustainability performance, etc., is really a happening place right now. It's where there's a lot of potential and opportunity to enable companies to go to the next level in some way. So that's where I am right now. I'm here just starting, and I'm really excited about being able to learn and engage and contribute in a new way.
And I will reiterate, at least personally, that I'm very happy that you decided to join, because I've learned so much from you already in the few weeks. How long has it been now? I feel like you've been here for a while. It's been a few weeks.
3 weeks.
3 weeks, yeah, almost there to the month. And I feel like I've learned so much. I mean, as I still think of myself as being early on in my sustainability career. And one of the things that you mentioned that you went through was having that career crisis, right? Where you wanted to do meaningful, impactful work. And it's something that I hear a lot of persons in my generation and even the generation after me talking about right now as part of their job search, that they don't just want a job anymore. They don't just want an income or a salary. They want to be making change and influencing change and driving change. And in some cases, they are now putting companies on the spot during that interview process to make sure that their values align, but also that the work that they're doing is impactful. So it's almost comforting to know that this is not a crisis of today, but it's also something that sustainability professionals throughout their career, regardless of the time, whether it was in ESG, CSR, sustainability, private sector, public sector, it's something that most, if not all, sustainability professionals go through, that it's a genuine passion that we've chosen a career in this space, that we actually want to humanize business, which was a phrase you used early on that I loved, but that we want to make the world a better place, if that's not too cheesy to say.
Even if it's cheesy, it's how we feel, right? So
it's how we feel. Yeah. So yeah, it's fitting to know that you've also had those moments of introspection and crisis in a good way that have shaped your career and led you to the choices you've made. Welcome again. I'm curious, given what you've seen over time, given what's happening in the sustainability and ESG space right now, what are some of the feelings that you have, the thoughts that you have with what's going on in the ESG and sustainability world? I mean, it's blowing up, right? It's the hot topic everywhere you look.
It is. And I have to say, Rajiv, I I had already been really surprised how much things evolved since 2003, which was when I really started in my career in sustainability. And, you know, let's say just even 5 years ago, I had thought, wow, you know, when I got started, it was like you had to explain everything from scratch. People didn't even know what sustainability was in most cases. And so there was a steady, I don't know, I think of it like an increasing of the temperature of pressure, understanding, realization that this is important and actually it's critical and actually it's here to stay. We better get used to this. And, you know, those 2 years when I was focusing on, you know, getting a startup going and thinking about other things and coming back, I just like, oh my God, you know, like what has happened here? It really has exploded and accelerated in an incredible way. And a few reflections on my side on that are, well, I was thrilled because it's like what I always hoped for and dreamed for in many ways, that it would become mainstream to this extent. And I maybe I never dreamed that it would quite. But of course, you know, there are a lot of tensions in the way things are right now. So you've got, frankly, I think that even people like myself and others who've been in the sustainability space for a while are kind of overwhelmed and confused to some extent by, you know, all the frameworks and the standard setting and the legislation and the implications of that, and all the information that's flowing from every direction on ESG. And so, wow, it's taking me a while to reorient myself in that new world, I have to say. And yeah, I've noticed that, at least in the circles that I've been moving in, and of course that's more in Europe than in North America, I've noticed that there is this real focus now on impact, positive impact. When I was in the finance industry, impact investing was still considered more of a niche and much harder to achieve. And I think it is harder to achieve still in many ways. But what's shifted in no uncertain terms from my perspective is that now you've got mainstream actors who are looking at it, either whether they're entrepreneurs or business owners, thinking more about how their businesses can contribute to a positive social and environmental well-being and value creation. And for investors as well, looking to support and finance all of that positive impact, not forgetting that we still have a long way to go to reduce our negative impact on the world, right? But this really caught my eye, that everybody was talking about and wanting to hire people and focus their strategies, in Europe at least, and probably in other places in the world, on positive impact. That was unexpected for me. And I realize it's not the case everywhere, but it was a significant shift in, you know, how things were just a couple of years before. And I would add to that on the other side of the coin, pain is still there. It's hard. It's hard to bring about change in an organization that's part of a system and an economic system that's been in place for the last 150 years or so.
Sometimes it feels like one step forward, 20 steps back, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or sometimes it feels like you're tinkering around the edges and making things look good and feel good and some improvements, but that, you know, it's what I had mentioned before, that perhaps on the fundamentals we haven't shifted it. So I've been through that pain myself for so many years of trying to bring about that change, and I know that, you know, so many of my fellow sustainability practitioners out there today are feeling that pain. And you know, sometimes you can feel bewildered and lost and, you know, lacking in energy, because it's quite the focus on performance is still really strong, and so it's easy to get overwhelmed and exhausted. So I don't want to kind of give the impression that with everything that I'm saying about positive impact, that's it. You know, we've waved the magic wand. But, you know, there's a kind of a dichotomy there, which I did pick up as well in the conferences that I went to last week. So that's kind of where I'm feeling at the moment. And of course, we've seen the backlash to ESG, and, you know, there's a lot of debate going on at the moment, which some quite polarized views. So I'm kind of looking and reflecting on all of that and seeing, curious as to how things are going to evolve in this space. But I remain fundamentally optimistic. I don't think we've ever been as well positioned as we are today to be closer to that, what I think of as a paradigm shift towards, you know, the world that we want to see. So that's really where I am today, and still in a position of learning and coming back up to speed.
No, thank you very much for sharing that. I appreciate that, if I may paraphrase, but for me, it's almost a little sense of anxiety every now and then in sustainability, because you want to move the dial forward, you want to make that change, but then, for example, proxy season, with activists and shareholders, every proxy season you hold your breath to see what happens at the end, to see what changes have been made, and occasionally a change rocks the sustainability, well, that is the financing side of things, and we look at it as a positive change in sustainability. But then there's times when that is not necessarily the case, and you get deflated just a little bit. So I totally see where you're coming from, and I have similar views there on the highs and lows, the emotional toil it takes on you.
Yeah.
But you mentioned being at a few events. I want to touch on those events in a couple of minutes, but I want to ask a question that we didn't necessarily discuss before. And the question came to mind after you were, giving us the highlight reel of your career thus far, and it was your focus on strategy. And I wanted to ask a very simple, high-level question. Why is strategy important? Why is an ESG or sustainability strategy important for any organization?
I kind of learned quite quickly in the work I was doing that if you want to bring about something that you consider to be positive, either to reduce the negative impact of the company's activities on the world and on people, or to bring about more positive impact, then you've got to somehow integrate that intention into the overall intention of the company. And in most companies, that happens through the strategic objectives that are set at the top of the company. And so throughout my career, in every job that I had, I was always focusing on, okay, so you've got this kind of overall strategy, which may or may not already have some reference to sustainability. Until fairly recently, a lot of company strategy would not explicitly include objectives that might be related to sustainability. So my goal was always to fully embed sustainability in the company strategy and not just have some separate things that we do on the side. And the way that played out in my career was that I was focusing primarily on, yes, doing all the things we have to do to be a responsible company, to do things the right way, etc. But also in terms of the product and services of the company's core business, and look very deeply there. How does sustainability fit into the picture? What are the ways in which our products and services could have a negative impact or a very strong positive impact on stakeholders, society, the environment, people, etc. And so that was always my goal. And I think for me, it comes back to intention, right? We have these processes in companies today for how to go from an intention to executing on that intention. And strategy is fundamental to that. In particular, setting strategy in terms of very specific targets and things that you want to achieve, so that you can then, measure and figure out with the data that you've got whether you've achieved that objective or not. But I would add that one of the things I learned over my career was the importance of governance, which is like the foundation underpinning the strategy that the company sets. And what I found was that very often some maybe weaknesses or things missing in the governance of the organization could end up meaning that you can't even begin to integrate things into the strategy in a meaningful way. So I had a lot of learnings over my career on that, and it's still something that's very top of mind for me and for other companies today, I think, in terms of, are we setting ourselves up with the right governance structures to enable and create the conditions for what we're seeking to achieve?
No, thank you very much for sharing that. You mentioned the importance of intent, and one of the phrases that comes to mind, or one of the sayings that comes to mind all the time, is impact versus intent. That it's not enough to just want to do good. How are you actually executing? How are you implementing? And then ultimately, what is the end impact of that plan, right? And that needs to tie or align to your intent. You can't just say, I want to set a 2040 target, and that's the end of strategy. It's also reverse engineering that into a measurable realistic plan to get to that target and making sure you deliver impact along the way. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, so I want to shift gears a little bit to talk about those two events that you were at, which I'm a little bit envious that I wasn't able to join you, but that's why I wanted to have this conversation so I can understand what were some of the highlights from those events. I know you were at one in Lausanne and you were in Rome as well for both events. What's the highlight reel from both or any one of them? What were some of the main takeaways that remain with you a week later?
Yeah, thanks for asking about that, because actually I was so happy to go to these conferences. Since COVID, I have not been to a single conference, and this was like a breath of fresh air, like getting oxygen. So yeah, I had a wonderful week last week. I went to these two conferences. So the first one was in Lausanne, and the title it's called Showcase 2030, Scaling Solutions for a Net Positive Planet. And it's an event that is organized by what's called the E4S part of EPFL. So EPFL is a science and technology university or institution, which is kind of like the MIT of Switzerland. And they have, a lot of professors and people working on all manner of topics in the realm of science and technology. And in the past, they've held this event either digitally or in person on a smaller scale. But what's interesting this time around is, well, it was physical, and it was also held in collaboration with University of Lausanne and IMD. And so all three academic institutions coming together, not only them, but actually with national government and regional government, and with private sector, public sector companies, investors, and who am I missing in there? So basically, the concept behind this, and I find this absolutely fascinating and really effective, is to create an ecosystem for scaling these positive, sort of net positive solutions for the planet. There were perhaps about 100 or no, maybe 200 people there. There were several dozen startups and lots of other big organizations and institutions. So it was a very rich array, shall we say, of stakeholders and participants all talking about this, but with this nice sort of scientific edge to it. And in fact, one of the partners for this event was the Base for Impact, I think it's called. So it's talking about how can space technologies help support achieving sustainability goals. So there you go. Gives you
incredible using space tech to achieve sustainability.
And I was blown away by many of the startups that were there. You had, all sorts of wonderful things which had come from PhDs and activities within the university that they incubate and support. And create partnerships with other stakeholders to help them take off. So, the Swiss network and ecosystem is very rich and contributes in a very significant way to the overall competitiveness of the country.
FigBytes was represented at a tech conference this week in Toronto here, and similar to what you're describing, it was inspiring and mind-blowing to see what these young researchers are churning out, some of the very creative and innovative solutions they're coming up with to solve sustainability challenges. One of the things that jumped out at me, and I feel like you were underscoring that as well, was traditionally academics and research and academia was seen to have operated in a utopic world. They were disconnected from reality. They developed research that was great, but couldn't go anywhere. It sounds like we're seeing a shift where universities are setting up these incubators. They're actually testing these technologies and seeing how it can scale and be implemented in the real world.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's really exciting. Yeah. And so just to give you a high level view of the other conference I attended, which was quite different, but similar in many ways. So it was the Business for Good Leaders Summit in Rome. So this was organized by B Lab, which is the organization behind the B Corp certification, which I think is quite well known these days. And so apparently it was the first time that leaders from private sector, so it could be founders, CEOs, C-suite executives, leaders from all levels of the organization, investors were present as well. So similar sort of ecosystem feeling. And of course, the B Corp movement is focused on, having that positive intention to have business be a force for good. And so it was very much in the direction of the same kind of things that the Lausanne conference was focusing on. And the kind of wording that was being used there, so it wasn't so much net positive planet, but the words being used were regenerative economy, and thinking about the circular economy, regenerative economy, and rebooting the whole system. So there was a lot of talk about that at this conference, but essentially it was bringing people together to share their ideas, their projects, what they're working on, to find opportunities to collaborate, and of course to inspire one another. And there were some big names at the conference like Paul Polman and Emmanuel Faber and many, many others who are really inspiring. So it was a great opportunity to see a lot of the things that are going on in the B Corp movement and beyond.
I think of a running tech joke where we ask, have you tried unplugging the economy and plugging it back in to achieve that restart where we get to clean the slate and restructure and build a system of tomorrow. There were some very interesting ideas that were discussed at that event. One of them that you and I were chatting about that stood out to me was this concept of not a triple bottom line, but an integrated bottom line where we are redefining the success criteria that, makes a business valuable. So you're not just looking at generating profits, but you're trying to look at the value that we're creating together for ensuring well-being of the planet, well-being of the society across the board. That is very much a paradigm shift where traditional business leaders often separated making money from doing good.
Mm-hmm.
And this integrated bottom line is saying those are not exclusive concepts. You can actually do both. Any thoughts on that from the event?
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, actually, because I think it's something that has been gradually happening over time. It's sort of going from, if we think about the change of paradigm being from starting off with this concept of profit at any cost, even if it has a detrimental impact on people and nature, which I think is sort of what we've inherited from the Industrial Revolution. Not everywhere, because there were always many examples of business that wanted to have a positive impact and serve the kind of fundamental needs of consumers and society and communities. But we have seen the dominance in sort of the last 100 years of more focusing on profits. And I think with the triple bottom line and the gradual shift towards saying, no, we can't only define value in terms of the financial profit that we create. It's got to be about the social value, it's got to be about the environmental value, and of course the economic value. So with the triple bottom line, I think there was a legitimate and genuine attempt to bring all of those elements into a common framework and as you say, to redefine the criteria for success. But it was still staying a bit on the periphery. And what really came out of these two conferences, and in particular the B leaders, but actually no, both of them really, if I think about it, is that so the integrated bottom line. So the idea is, or at least what I'm seeing signs of, is an understanding of the fact that because we as a society are ascribing or assigning value now to environmental well-being, to the well-being of people and all of the people on the planet, not just some of the people on the planet, by catering and providing products and services to with the intention of creating that value, we will necessarily reap the economic and financial rewards from that. So it's literally turning it on its head and saying it's not all about profit and that's what we're going to do everything to achieve. It's about widening the scope and thinking, well, we want people to have, well-being and be healthy and have good levels of nutrition and enough water and all the things that we know, right? And that by now collectively agreeing that has a lot of value and we want to create that together, then new market mechanisms, new incentives are emerging that mean that you can make money from doing those things, right? So that's the general idea. And I think that the integrated bottom line, the way I'm interpreting it right now, is that we're not there yet. But number one, you've got to embed sustainability into your overall strategy, as what we were saying before. But ultimately, even today, even the companies that have been doing that for several years, not many of them have shifted to an integrated financial report, which, you know, has been held up as something to aim for quite some time now. And so why is that, right? There's a barrier to achieving that. And what's come out even more recently, I think, is the work that's been done, for example, by the Harvard Business Review initiative or the Harvard Business School initiative of the impact-weighted accounting. And so this notion that if you're integrating sustainability objectives in the way that we just described, into the objectives of the company overall, not a separate strategy, but then when it comes to financial reporting, that financial or overall reporting, integrated reporting, would ideally reflect the positive and negative impact that the company is having. And ideally, and this is what the Harvard Business School is working towards, be able to come up with a methodology that they have in fact created and are testing now with companies to give a monetary value to that positive or negative impact. So right now it's in the early stages, and of course all those impact entrepreneurs out there are sort of more likely to be able to gravitate to this kind of approach. But I certainly am hearing more about it and seeing it emerge as a vision that we're heading towards, even if we're kind of feeling our way, right? It's not so easy in practice to arrive at that, not least because you have to convince company management that that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I think some of these sustainability naysayers, if I may call them that, they beat up on sustainability professionals who can't come up with an instant solution that will have zero flaws and be perfect and ready tomorrow. And what we're seeing on the sustainability side is there's going to be some trial and error. There will be lessons learned. Things will work, things will not work. But if we're trying to change the way we do business, change the systems that we've developed over the past 50, 100, 200 years, that we need to start, right? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and we need to take that step and continue taking steps forward. It won't be easy, but we need to move in that direction.
Exactly. No, that's it. I think we have to be pragmatic and not beat up on ourselves, as you say, and, you know, be courageous and have those conversations that will open these possibilities up.
And as I mentioned, the single step, one of the concepts that was mentioned at the event in Rome was the giant leap, right? And I think it was Professor Randers who brought up the giant leap. And the giant leap, can you speak a little to what the giant leap is and what Professor Randers was discussing?
Yeah, this was actually one of the takeaways that I took from the two conferences together, actually, because this year is the 50th anniversary year of the publication of the Limits to Growth report, which was written by a number of different authors, including Professor Jürgen Randers, who was the keynote speaker actually at the Lausanne event. And it was a great learning experience for me because it wasn't something that I had really been steeped in the past. And at the Rome conference as well, there was exactly the same thing. Lots of talk about the fact this is the anniversary year. And Rome is the home of the Club of Rome as well, which is obviously the sort of birthplace of the Limits to Growth report, and that is very much involved still in that space. So this year in September, a new report, which is the sequel to Limits to Growth, which is called Earth for All, will be published. And Jürgen Randers was sharing with us a sort of an amazing overview, if you like, and a sneak preview to what will be in the Earth for All reports, reviewing where we are today in relation to those original scenarios that were put forward in Limits to Growth, and which were all about assessing sort of the state of the environment and society and the kind of scenarios that would lead us either to a positive or negative outcome. So there were 12 in total, he was explaining to us. His message in general was, it seems like if we look at where we are today, we're somewhere in the middle of the six good scenarios and the 6 bad scenarios. And the giant leap comes in because essentially what he was saying was, looking at where we are, looking at the situation, his view and what will be presented in the report is that if we're going to make it, if it's not going to be too little too late, then there has to be this giant leap, which is an extraordinary turnaround. So he talked a lot about a number of drivers that he saw, things that were absolutely critical to be able to turn things around and have a move towards a scenario that's going to be positive. And just thinking back to the kind of things that he said, but one of the key points that came out of his speech, and he wanted to clear up a misunderstanding, was that a lot of scientists or stakeholders had misunderstood the original limits to growth to mean that economic growth cannot continue if we want to live within the sort of planetary boundaries and have a successful life on Earth. But in fact, what he was saying was, no, we can have a sort of acceptable level of well-being for everyone on the planet, provided that we reduce the physical footprint of humanity's activity. And so this was really the focus of his presentation and another presentation by another environmental scientist who contributed to the IPCC report in April, about thinking about ways to mitigate demand and sort of anticipating the kinds of massive behavioral changes and lifestyle changes that will be necessary to achieve this. And I think it reflected, or it articulated very well, both the sense of urgency that was really conveyed at both events, and that we're feeling, I think, just generally is in the media, it's being shared around everywhere, and this focus on, so the giant leap will not, we can't carry on with business as usual. We can't continue in the same mindset. We can't continue in the same systems approach that we have now. We have to radically change things. So what emerged out of the conversations and was very present was, this is going to require radical innovation, radical collaboration, rethinking things completely, taking a systems view to the complexities. You can't, as a company or as a stakeholder, you can't only see your own piece of the puzzle. You have to open up and engage and understand how everything is interrelated, and dare to break free from this kind of linear competitive paradigm towards the circular collaborative paradigm. So really it was so rich, there was so much, and it's hard to put into words sometimes, but essentially everything at those two conferences was focusing on, how can we step out of that systems mindset that we're steeped in, and sometimes we don't even realize it. And maybe this is where the greenwashing comes in, that we think we're doing good, but actually it's nowhere near enough, and it's not. We have to go to a completely different level. So yeah, it's hard to convey in a few sentences the intensity of that. And what I do see, and I think this was the last takeaway that I was sharing with you, was that what this is making people realize is that we're not going to be able to do this if we continue in the sort of way we've been engaging with each other and the way we've been operating in businesses and our official interactions with each other. We have to we have to dig deep into what's meaningful for us as individuals, the purpose, the values, coming back to that original point we were talking about, and have radical authenticity, right? Being ourselves truly, and connecting with our emotions and with our hearts. And this is really interesting because it's something which is normally taboo in a lot of companies. But just to give you a sense of this, one of the parts of the Rome conference that I appreciated the most was that at the very beginning, a large number of CEOs and other leaders were invited on stage. Again, there was something like 700 people present, and they were invited to share their personal dream. And they sort of all went up on stage and they ended up holding hands. And after that, there was John Lennon's Imagine, which was played. And so this was something which I think, you mentioned cheesy before, but some people might put it in that category.
Yeah.
But I personally, and I noticed that there were a lot of people in the room who, were shedding the odd tear here or there. I think there's a realization that in order to make the kind of shift we need to make, we have to go to that level of our values and who we are and what we want to achieve. And that this is becoming acceptable in not every business environment that we work in, but what I see increasingly is that you've got big names, mainstream leaders who are daring to do it. And when they dare to do it, then other people feel that they have permission to bring their whole selves to work, for example, and share who they are and what they want to see happen.
And I would say it's not cheesy, because we opened the call and you mentioned humanizing business. And at the end of the day, regardless of the titles, regardless of the fantastic careers and the assets that these leaders manage, the billions and trillions of dollars, they were human first. And some of the articles that you see in the sustainability space talk about a good sustainability leader having high emotional intelligence, where they can draw on those emotions and understandings and experiences from the human side to influence their business decisions. So yeah, someone will say it's cheesy, but I can see how that's impactful to have business leaders demonstrate by holding hands and John Lennon playing in the background. That's definitely impactful at a conference. It makes you wonder that these are not, it makes you realize, sorry, that these are not just suits and checkbooks you're looking at and decision makers. These are human beings who probably have families and kids and grandkids that will be impacted by whichever direction the system goes in.
Exactly. And it's reminiscent also of, Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream. There are moments in history where that's the kind of thing that it takes, right, to federate the kind of unity that we need to bring about significant change in our societies. And I would just use an example also of that. At the Lausanne conference, I particularly appreciated the presentation or speech by the chief technology officer of a company called Bühler in Zurich in Switzerland. So it's a very large company, privately owned, which creates the equipment for food processing and mobility solutions, vehicle parts, etc. And so quite a significant company. And what really struck me about the speech by Ian Roberts, who, spoke on stage very openly and authentically about his experience, what his company is doing, but he put a lot of emphasis on the role of youth in all of this, right? Because young people, as you mentioned before, in their masses, right, are kind of feeling the need for change. They feel it viscerally and they desperately want it on the whole. This is the kind of trend I think we see. And there's a real acknowledgement of the importance of, in this new regenerative economy and society that we're thinking about, that needs to be, of course, inclusive to enable social equality, to make room for the perspectives and the voices of young people and young leaders who can bring those fresh perspectives. And so what was amazing was that they were explaining that they had decided, as the CEO, the CFO, and the CTO in this case, were all personally very committed and motivated in the way that we've just been describing, to the point that they said, look, I think we need to invite the young people in our company to come in and analyze and look at our strategy and tell us what they think we need to do in order for this to be the kind of place that they want to work in. So they did that, and they invited them to propose a new strategic approach, to be part of the rethinking of the strategy of the organization. And it was very successful. It took them to the next level, and they're still moving in that direction. And what they've done is they've kind of institutionalized this approach so that anyone in the company, this includes, the young people, anything they feel passionate about that they want to, lead in terms of a project that might have social and environmental benefit, they're free to do that. And I found it very touching, actually, that the young woman who was representing this particular youth movement in their company, and that is part of an organization, let me see if I can remember that, because I do want to mention that. Is it One Young World? I think that was the one. this youth organization that is also present in Switzerland. Anyway, so this young woman got up on stage and spoke very eloquently and inspiringly about the importance of listening to young voices, and also of the critical nature of networks and partnerships in being able to achieve these ambitious goals that we need to set. So yeah, it was a nice thought. And I noticed also that the Rome conference, they did things like leaving an empty chair for to represent the future generations that we have to bear in mind, or leaving an empty chair for anybody in the audience who would like to come up and share a divergent point of view, to sort of really underline the importance of, hey, we've got to listen to each other, right? We have to open ourselves up and listen and create these solutions, co-create these solutions in a way that is sort of reflecting all the diverse perspectives that need to be taken into account.
And maybe that comes back to redefining how we choose our stakeholders for something like a materiality assessment. I can't, off the top of my head, think of a materiality assessment that I've read through where I've seen young people identified as a stakeholder group whose inputs should be sought during the decision-making process. So that might be the future that we're looking at, where we see materialities going beyond employees and board and community, and now to a more granular and social, through a social lens, where you're seeing different generations being included as or identified clearly within the assessment.
But no, I agree, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that it comes back to that point about equipping our boards as well, you know, that there was this strong feeling that there's not necessarily the expertise and the mindset, making sure that you've got your board is reflecting the diversity of mindset as well as gender and
it doesn't necessarily mean listening to external views. Again, I'm sure many of these traditional decision makers have families and have kids and have grandkids who are bringing these ideas home, but they're probably just not hearing or listening to them within their own spaces, right? So yeah. I know we're coming close to the time. I wanted to ask one last question.
Sure.
To get your thoughts on, and that would be, what's next for Kate? What do the next 3 months, maybe 6 months? I won't ask you to look a year out, because given the changes that are happening in ESG, I can't even tell you what a year would look like for Rajiv. So what do the next 3-6 months look like for you, here at FigBytes?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Well, it's just a wonderful moment of discovery. So obviously I'm understanding more about how FigBytes works and what we need to do also in the sustainability space. So there's that part of it. But I think also what I'm particularly looking forward to is engaging with companies, sustainability practitioners, people in companies who are working on all of this and having these experiences. I'm looking forward to teasing out the big opportunities and the sort of big trends and where we're moving, and telling positive stories, because that also came out at the conference about, you know, if we want to shift to a new paradigm, we have to reinvent the narrative, right? We have to tell new stories. So looking to the future and all the opportunities we have and the great things that are out there beginning to happen or already happening, and also speaking more to or weaving in those pain points, right? Those challenges. What can we learn together? How can we pool our understanding and experience to take that giant leap and to really enhance the things that we were planning to do already, or that we might end up doing differently when we hear from and share more with each other. So I'm looking forward to engaging with people inside FigBytes, outside FigBytes, and working out together how we're going to do this. So I think there are many different ways in which that might manifest, and I'm looking forward to the creativity of it, the exploration, the learning, and yeah, doing our best together to take us to the next level.
Now, if it's one thing there's no shortage of in ESG, it's fun. No 2 days are the same, and there's never a dull day. So I'm very much, again, personally, I'm looking forward to learning from your lived experiences in ESG, but also pooling those ideas together so we can go and save the world or try to save the world.
Right. Thanks a lot. I look forward.
Sounds good. So thank you so very much, Kate, for taking time to connect. I look forward to our next webcast together.
Fantastic. Me too. Take care.
Okay.